Hey everybody, I'd like to talk about wire first before we get into making ear wire frames. This right here is 18 gauge wire. And what's interesting about wire is that the smaller you go, the thicker it is. So it's like an inverse relationship to what we're used to thinking. And so this right here, for example, is a 10 gauge wire. So you would think that 10 gauge wire is thinner, but it's actually thicker. This is going to be like the gauge of wire that I would use for bangles, or let's just say if I'm trying to make like an organic bar necklace I'm hammering it down to something thick and flat. And then this right over here is the very thin wire, and there's actually thinner than this, but this is the 26 gauge that most jewelers use for just simple wire wraps. Again, this is just a mandrel that I got from Home Depot. This is the 1-inch mandrel. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 18 gauge wire and I'm going to create a frame for my earring. So I'm going to wrap it around. And what I always do is I leave a little bit extra space on one side than the other, because that's going to be where I curl it over to create the loop that the hook will go through. So let's just say that, let's go with this one right here. And I'm going to take this piece right here, straighten it up again, and I'm going to cut the exact same piece measured with this longer wire. And so let's just say that I'm making 10 of these. Well, I'll just do all these lengths and cut all of these lengths up front so that I know that all of them are identical in size. And once they are all of the same length, then I can ensure that all of them will be identical. Okay, so I'm going to wrap it around. And I always leave, again, one side a little longer than the other, because this I'm going to loop over this way, and I'm going to create the hoop, the little hook or hoop that the hook is going to go through. And if you guys want to see my hook video, I posted that yesterday on IG videos. So here we go. So again, one side is going to be longer than the other because that's going to be the side that gets hooped over. I'm going to take my round nose pliers here and I'm going to do this. Excuse the sound outside. My husband is mowing the lawn. Okay, now I just did that. You see that? And then I'm going to take this side over here and I'm going to wrap it around this way. So all I have to do after that is hook it. So I have a kind of like a time-lapse video that I put up late last night on how to make the frame. Okay, so that's how you make the frame right there. And then I'll show you how I hammer it afterwards. But let me just make the identical side. So again, this is the longer side. So on that side, I'm going to make the little hook or the hoop. And on this side, I'm going to hook it over this way and then hook together. Okay, so you could kind of fix, if it doesn't look perfectly the way that you want it to, you could fix that by using your flat nose pliers and fixing it. So now I have 2 of these. I'm gonna round that out a little bit. Okay, so now that I have these, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hammer them, because if I don't hammer them when I wire wrap it, it's not going to be able to, or the 26 gauge wire is not going to be able to wire or wrap around this as easily if there's nothing to cling onto. I think of it as kind of like if you are scaling a wall. You're not going to be able to scale the wall very easily when there's rounded edges on it because your fingers have nowhere to grab onto. But if it's hammered and there's an actual like ledge here, then the wire wrapping could go easily around and cling to it. Okay, so let's begin with just hammering this. If you would like to elongate this look, you could hammer it up here more and make it longer. So the hammering Hammering has many different techniques to it. If you want to widen it, you can hammer more down on this side. Okay, so I'm just doing this. And I could also mess with the shape of the teardrop by using my flat nose plier. There we go. And again, if you're gonna do many of these, you should wear some earplugs. All right, so I'm gonna make this a little bit longer. I like that look, that's cute, but for this video, I want to make this a little bit longer. So I'm going to create some tension up here. And as I do that, it's going to elongate the teardrop look. See how I did that? If I just create some tension there, it creates a different look. It's not as wide up here as this one. You guys see the difference? Okay, so I'm going to do the same thing with this one here. Create some tension up here. And I'm going to create some tension on this side to elongate the look. And so now I've got two elongated hoops here now. I could pound it a little bit on the other side to even it out. You always want to keep this hook portion off of the steel plate, because if you bend that, it's going to mess up your entire earring frame. So always keep it there, hook off the edge. And I'm going to hammer that down. Okay, so what I have here, I've already prepared 15 pieces of little rondelles of mother of pearl. I just love mother of pearl. It's so pretty and it looks great with gold. When it comes to wire wrapping, so now I'm going to take my 26 gauge wire, and what sucks the most is if you are wire wrapping and you think, or you thought that you cut enough wire, and then you end up only at about, let's say you start here and you're all the way here and you run out of wire. That is the worst case scenario, because now you've just wasted time, you've wasted gold wire, and you got to start all over. So instead of doing that, and that's happened so many times to me, what I've learned is the distance that I am going to wire wrap, I take that portion, and it's not going to be exact. I take that portion, I multiply it by 3 in length. So it's about this much. And so I'm going to cut about this long now. It's way longer starting from here. This is the amount of wire that I'm going to use for that section. And I'm going to start at, let's just say right over here. I just want it to be wire wrapped at the bottom. So I'm going to begin my first wire wrap right around here. So take the wire like this and then wrap it around. The first time I did this, I remember I was sitting next to my grandmother in the retirement home that she lived at, and I was showing her, and it was my first time attempting doing it, and it was so bad. Oh my goodness. I remember afterwards thinking, I don't know how to make jewelry. I should just quit this hobby. And thank God I didn't quit, but that's just encouragement for all of you guys who are trying something new and you feel like you can't do it. You can, okay? It took me a while to finally master how to make these ear frames. Okay, so you see what I've done there. I've wire wrapped it around, and I'm going to tie it around twice, and you're just going to continue this process. It is a long and tedious process to wire wrap these things. And, but you know, if you're listening to a good podcast, or if you're listening to Audible, whatever, sermon on YouTube, time goes by. And this is actually really therapeutic for me. All right, so either it's going to be silent or I could talk about something while I'm doing this. Let's go back to talk about the first time I ever applied to a show. So the first time I ever applied to a show was probably in July of 2010. So I started making jewelry in 2008. And the first time I ever put anything up was on Etsy. And literally, it was 1 or 2 designs that I put up on Etsy. And it sat there for about 2 years before anybody ever purchased it. By the way, Etsy works really differently now. I actually have taken my a lot of my stuff off of Etsy, and I have my old shop still there, but literally nobody goes to it because you have to pay to play now, it seems like, on Etsy. It's not like the old do-it-yourself community. All the algorithms, they just really shut you out. So anyway, that's where I started, and I could not believe that somebody wanted to purchase something that I made. You know, and it made me feel like, wow, could I really do this? And soon after that, more people started purchasing things on Etsy. And you guys know that my first shop was called Paradise Bungalow. And that was because, in my 20s, I was definitely traveling a lot, going to all these beautiful places, mostly in the South Pacific. And I loved all of the seashells that I was finding, and I loved making things out of it. And that's where the name Paradise Bungalow had come from. And eventually, 10 years later is when I actually rebranded, and now it's called Amy Jennings Designs. So anyway, the first show that I ever was in was The Renegade, which at the time I thought was by Etsy, but I guess not. So The Renegade is still going on in downtown LA and in other major cities across the United States. And that was definitely a learning lesson because it just seemed like everybody there knew what they were doing and I didn't. You know, my setup was not cute. Now that I think back to it, I thought it was, but compared to what everybody else was doing, my setup was so beyond basic. But I learned from it, and that's what I want all of you guys to know is that, yeah, you fail, and you fail a lot, but you'll learn from it. And then after that, I did several other little festivals here and there, but the one that I personally shopped at and I just loved was Unique Markets. And I am thankful and fortunate to have been at all 3 of their markets last year. And anyway, so I always shopped at Unique Markets, even before I sold jewelry. I love so many of the things that I found over there, truly unique items. And I think I applied to Unique Markets maybe 7 or 8 times, and I got rejected every single time. You know, each time you're rejected like that, it's important not to think that that is your self-worth. It's not. Okay, so if I measured my self-worth in my jewelry, I would think I'm such a loser because I keep getting rejected from all these shows, but it was just a learning lesson. Like, hey, what am I not doing that people want to see? Okay, and one of the things was I didn't have a dedicated website, and that's something that I worked on since then. Another thing was like unified branding. My branding was all over the place. And it took one of my good friends, Donna, of Our Heyday, you should follow them, they have great stationery, who told me, hey, you might want to think about rebranding. So anyway, going back to this earring, see how I finished that? And it just looks so gorgeous on. Okay, so I'm going to make the second one. My mind is all over the place. It's really hard to multitask. No, a lot of people think that women are so great at it. Yes, we are, but up to a point. Okay, so again, I'm going to take that and I'm going to multiply it by 3, so it's going to be around this much. And I knocked off one of the mother of pearl beads. So now we're at 14. So I counted to make sure that I have 14 beads and not 15, because this one has 14 on it. I want it to be the same. So I'm going to start on the second one now. And I want to make sure that I start at the very same place that I started the first one at. So it's about right here. And so I'm going to tie it down here. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to wrap it around like this. And I like to wrap it around 3 times for that first wrap. And I could fix, this doesn't have to be perfect just yet. I could fix it afterwards. And I'm going to do the same thing. And so the last time I was talking with you, I was talking about how I rebranded. But yes, before that, my first show was at downtown LA's historic cornfields right next to Chinatown. And I realized I do not like doing outdoor markets. It was just really difficult. You know, you have to take everything down after the show. First, setting up for something like jewelry is really difficult because I make so many different designs and I want to put out all those different designs. You know, I don't have like 10 things in my collection and those are just the 10 things that I set up. Setting up takes a really long time, and I've actually figured out different ways to help me to set up faster. And I've developed that probably by the second market of 2019 at Unique Markets, because I did not want to come back every day and set up for an hour and a half. So all of these shows cost about $650 each. And even 10 years ago, I want to say that I paid something like $600 for the Renegade. And it was still worth it. And you know what's crazy is that weekend was the weekend of Carmageddon. I don't know if you guys remember that in 2010, but I forget why they called it Carmageddon, but they're shutting down the freeways for some reason. And I had gotten accepted into the Renegade craft show, and then they called Carmageddon like 2 months later. So it still was good. I still had a great showing. I was so tired. I remember afterwards being so exhausted and then coming home having to make more jewelry because I ran out. That's a good problem. And it's great that people still wanted to buy from me when my booth looked so so basic, and it just looked like like some rando was setting it up with no thought. I mean, I thought it looked okay, but ew. If I look back on it now, ew, I would never do that. Anyways, good times, good memories. It's always good to remember, you know, where you start from. And, you know, for those of you guys who hope to do something like this in the future, you know, it's not like I'm some expert, but I love talking to people who do things like this and who are in small business, because it is such a hustle, you know. And anyways, I find that I am still tired after a long day of selling jewelry, but I'm such an extrovert that I love talking to people. So whether people buy or not, I'm having conversations. Oops, I dropped another one. Do you know who's a bigger extrovert than I am, and he doesn't realize it? Is my husband. So every year he's like, I'm going to just drop you off, help you set up, and I'm going to leave. And then he ends up talking to every single person at the Unique Markets. And you guys all know how he looks like. He is a, I'm trying to get this, big Samoan guy who is very distinct, has a distinct look with his beard and goatee and all that, and his cap. So everyone knows him at the show, and it's great having a partner who could do those things with me. Okay, so see how it's uneven? Okay, I don't know if you could tell that it's uneven, but it's a little bit higher on this side than it is on this side. What you could do is you just kind of shimmy it over. All right, start on this side and start shimmying it over, and try not to bend the frame, and you can do it. This happens all the time. It's perfectly normal. So you don't have to freak out if that happens to you. Okay, so there we go. And then I'm just going to clip it right here and then I'm gonna clip it right over here. Okay, and then these edges are going to be a little sharp. So what I do is I squeeze together what I have like that, and then I'm going to smack that baby into this so that there are no sharp edges. And same thing on this side. I'm gonna squeeze it together, and then I'm gonna smack it into there. Okay, now look how I messed up the frame, but no fear. You just tighten it up that way. And you can adjust everything the way that you like. So there we go. Hope you enjoy that.